Has a past painful experience prevented you from coming back to church? Let's talk about it. This is Size Theology. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Size Theology, a ministry of Springfield First. I'm your host, Allison Means, and today I am joined by Justin Snyder as we talk about church hurt. Hey, Justin.
Hey, what a great topic on this day, right?
Oof, it's a biggie, right?
It is a biggie, yes.
So church hurt, when we're talking about people being hurt by the church, we're talking a lot about the church, right? When we talk about that. But we don't usually mean like the entire church. It's not like the entire church looked at this one person and said, "You're bad."
Yeah, I mean, there are those crazy stories, but generally you're right. It's usually, in my experience, an interaction with an individual or maybe a few people in a church that, for whatever reason, was either harmful or really left a bad taste in the mouth or was somehow went sideways, and that has left a lasting impression about the church in general. That's one category that I've seen a lot. But again, no two stories are ever the same. And probably both of us know a lot of people, since we were raised in the church, we know a lot of people who have stepped away from church.
Oh,
Would
absolutely.
That be fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People that I grew up with that have had things happen and have left. And, even people that I went to Bible college with that went into ministry have since stepped away because of painful experiences that they've had even while working in ministry.
Sure, yeah.
Which is its own thing.
Yeah. I mean, and so it's a huge topic, I guess, but as we think about those we know or those or any experiences we ourselves maybe have experienced, I think there's a number of things that help me. One is that here in our church or in the United Methodist tradition, those churches who regularly have Holy Communion are invited to a prayer of confession every time we come to communion. And one of the lines we say in that confession prayer is that we have failed to be an obedient church and we've not done God's will. And I think that is it's humbling to pray that communally, to know that there are ways, if we really think about it, where the church has not lived up to the call of Jesus. And to pray that as a church can be very powerful, not to point a finger at someone else and what they're doing wrong, but to take a hard look within us. So for those of us who are a part of a vibrant church family, it's always good to ask within yourself, where have I failed to live into the call of Christ? Where have I failed in love this week? Where have I not been able to be the disciple that Christ calls me to be? And what kind of harm has that done outside of my framework or where I can sense where I might have done something wrong? And that's just strong medicine. It's helpful to ask those kinds of questions regularly. What we've done and left undone is another phrase that we sometimes use. So that is helpful for me to think of, okay, we are called to regular confession and to humbly admit our faults. So that's a great starting point, I think, for how to maybe address when the church gets things wrong or when someone has received a lot of pain because of their involvement in a faith community.
Yeah, I think that is really great insight, especially because a lot of times that hurt from one person is exacerbated by a lack of acknowledgement or accountability taken by the larger church body when something like that happens.
I used to joke in a prior church, the pastors were the last to know sometimes what was really happening, maybe an interaction, say, between two church members that really was troubling or left a bad taste with somebody. And it's hard because we want everybody to have a great experience in our faith communities. I mean, I don't know of any pastor or church leader who wants anybody to not have a wonderful experience within their faith community. But because the church as an institution is a human institution,
Yeah.
even though it has divine origins, Jesus founded the church, still we're humans, and
People are messy.
people are messy. We can be messy at times. And so having just that recognition that we really do need to treat each other with a lot of care and handle some things with grace. Now, that's not to excuse any kind of bad behavior, and there are examples of the church, of churches who have sometimes rushed to hide things that needed to come out, things that were very painful, and only later, when they did come out, you could easily see that, man, this should have been addressed head on. So much more pain was caused by trying to avoid having hard conversations about things that needed to be addressed. So that's another thing that hopefully we can avoid and I say we, anyone who's investing in the church now, not just Springfield First, but any church. And no church is perfect also. So we need to make sure that if there's another faith community or really human institution in the world that is perfectly living into their call, I would love to know about it, because I'm really curious about how to...
Please send me all of their information. I would love to go.
Yeah, exactly. Now, all of that, I say this kind of as, some statements here at the beginning. None of what I've said so far would be that comforting to somebody who's really feeling some strong pain due to the church. And so I think we also have to be in relationship, when we are in relationship with people who have experienced church hurt from the church or hurt from people in the church, we have to be good listeners, and we just have to sit with them, and we have to not import or project our stuff and say, oh, you need to get over that, or you got this wrong. We have to be good listeners, I would think.
Yeah, I would say that is key. Somebody's lived experience, you can't minimize it when they're sharing that with you. That's so vulnerable.
Yeah.
So for them to say, like, I had this terrible experience happen to me, and trauma is not a competition. So whatever that is to them was trauma to them, and it was hurtful and harmful to them.
Yeah.
So for us to come back and be like, well, my church isn't like that, that just kind of negates their experience, and that's going to turn people off from ever wanting to have those conversations with you again.
No, absolutely. I agree. And yet long term, I've known of a few cases in my time. I've been a pastor full-time 19 years, and I have seen some examples of people sticking together through really hard stuff where there was tension, where there was disagreement, where there was genuine pain and offenses caused to each other. And somehow the gospel broke out in their hearts, and they were able to stay at the table with each other. And over a long period of time, as truthful speaking in love happened, they were able to move past it. And when you see that in flesh and blood, like right before your eyes, it really brings home the reality of the truth of what Jesus says and what he calls us to in reconciling with each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's important when we bring in Jesus in, let's say, Matthew 18 and his instructions for what to do when someone harms you. It always strikes me, Jesus says, when someone offends or when someone sins against, not if. Different translations say it differently, perhaps. But as if to say, hey, we are humans. Right. You need to expect that you will have to have some reconciliation and forgiveness. And if we remember that, and if we're seeking forgiveness, I think that already can change the environment when it comes to that harm. What I think what happens oftentimes is folks who are unwilling because of their pain, and maybe their pain is so immediate and so sharp, they just can't, they're not interested in actually seeking out any kind of forgiveness because it's, the immediate reaction is just to be one of, just, I need to step away. Yeah. I need a break. I need some time. And that's okay. You have to let people do what they need to do.
Right.
But I also have been amazed to see how people, when they stick to a community and figure out how to work through the pain or hurt or offense or whatever it was, then much good can come from that if the truth is spoken in love and if there's not an effort to try to quickly brush it aside or avoid having, really to address the harder things.
So how would you approach somebody that is in your life then to talk about faith with them, to maybe invite them to church, knowing that they have this church hurt in their past? Like, how would you approach it?
In the past, I've told people to, when they're, first of all, figure out what you're ready for.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe coming into a church service is a huge step to come back to church. I've known people who have told me, this was a huge step. Just getting my body into the worship center was a big deal. And so you just have to honor that, and you give people space to figure out what they need, and then encourage them to, I say, sometimes we joke, I want you to talk to this person, or, but I want them to recognize that there are people who will have their back. There are people who will love them for whom they are, and they want to be a companion on the journey with them. And just knowing that you are among friends can kind of maybe let some of the defensiveness or the self-protective measures fall away a little bit. And then when someone's ready to come back to a church or to try church again, I'd say take it slow. I'd say ask questions up front about, and bring up your concerns.
Yeah.
Email the pastor. Go have coffee with a pastor or someone who's in leadership and ask those questions. I know as a pastor myself, we love those conversations, to be able to not do any kind of sales pitching, but to say, here's what we're good at, here's where we're needing a lot more growth, and here's what we see, and if this could be helpful to you, then we invite you to keep coming. And know that as a pastor, it's not about, I think we want to encourage the body of Christ that exists not only within our walls, but outside of our walls. Yeah. Like the kingdom of God is what Jesus came to inaugurate. And so I hope our church can be an instrument in that, but I recognize that sometimes a different church is just a better fit for somebody. And so we honor that as well. If someone senses that another church is what they need, then we bless that. Yeah,
totally. Something that I think, if you're a person that is going out and talking to your friends, and they tell you that they have, this painful experience, and you do invite them, you have to be okay with them saying no.
Yeah.
Because chances are they're going to say no more than once.
Sure.
Because like you said, that just getting into a building can be a big step for somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we're all in different places on this. And so it's so hard to say, here's my best advice, when I know every two scenarios are not quite the same. So in the post-COVID world of online church, many people can, check something out online, to see what the teachings are like, what's the feel, what's the music. Those are kinds of those issues that people often wonder about. But for those who maybe carry some major reservations or have some pretty deep wounds from another faith community in the past, then I want our church to be a place where they can come, be themselves, be as comfortable as they can be, and know that they have people who will love them and people who will care for them and walk with them as they explore coming back to church.
Totally. Yeah, church is not only for, people who've got it figured out. In fact, there's not one person in that building who's got it figured out. If they tell you they do, they are lying.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's a building full of imperfect people generally speaking, trying their best.
Yeah.
And I think most people are working and, acting in good faith to try to love others the best that they can.
And to risk maybe another biblical illustration, we think about the prophets. Sometimes in the history of God's people, prophets had to be called out to say a truth to God's people during that time. And so while any institution sometimes avoids painful speech or truthful speech that can be painful, ultimately that can be very helpful at times. And so if there are people who need to convey something that they don't feel is right, I think they need to be listened to, and they need to be handled with care and love, and then have that conversation, what their concerns are. That's not to say that the church will immediately meet every concern, and particularly when you get into, there's lots of different theological practices, let's say baptism, for example, or, there's lots of different ways we can do church, and sometimes that brings up disagreements. But to me, that's different than causing deep church harm. I think you can't really blame a church for being true to who they've always been as far as a theological background or a way that they do their liturgy or their worship. But sometimes we do need to hear those truth speakers, those truth tellers, challenge us and to maybe wake us up at times to see maybe our witness does need to improve in this area.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Sometimes the hard words are the most important.
Yeah. And to be non-defensive enough to receive that and to receive what it's worth, and to listen and to at least be able to think about those words when they come up can be very helpful for the church.
Yeah, I really like that. Even as you were saying at the beginning, if you are a part of the church and you are, looking to witness to and to reach out to people who've been hurt, you've got to be a listener long before you're a speaker.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time that needs to be invested in that relationship before you may ever talk about God or bring up coming to church.
Absolutely. But I would challenge folks, though, who consider themselves Christian, but the pain has prevented them from coming back to a church. I would gently invite them to think again about the life of Jesus and how he challenged his disciples and how he showed up in the midst of their imperfect lives, and how so much good was given to them and their mission, and he was present with them, even in their disappointment, even in their heartbreak at times. When I think of the two travelers on the Emmaus Road, and Jesus is walking along with them. So they're traveling, they're outside of the worshiping community, they're just out on a walk, and they don't realize Jesus is with them. And so for some people, I've had to tell them, Jesus is walking with you, and when you're ready, Jesus is probably ready for you to come back to church. But I just to not give them a high pressure kind of invitation, but to say it's not that God's far from you in this time, but still there's much beauty and much good that can come in your life from being part of a living, breathing faith community. So
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And we'll save you a seat.
That's right.
So you can sit next to me.
There you go. Yeah.
Because to some degree, most of us have experienced some sort of hurt. Like you said, we both grew up in the church. I'm a pastor's kid. I've been in many different churches, and you as a pastor, I'm sure, have also, we've been hurt by people, and we have to wrestle with that and decide every day, like what we let that affect in our lives.
Right.
Again, trauma's not a competition.
No.
But I think listening with an empathetic ear to those people is so, so important.
Yeah. I mean, if Jesus is risen from the dead, then kind of all bets are off. And when we draw conclusions about anything, the resurrection brings us back to saying, oh, I might be wrong about something, and I might have missed out on something I needed to see. And so I would say to someone, another thing I'd say to somebody who's struggling with the church today is that, if Jesus is alive, if Jesus is risen, then there could be a way forward for you that you just haven't seen, as far as coming back into the body of Christ in a fuller manner than maybe you are now. And so, I just think of how that band of disciples and Jesus followers on Easter Sunday were a mess. They were scared, they were frightened, and some of them were in a lot of pain, but it was the risen presence of Jesus that changed their lives from that moment on, and really gave them the energy to re-engage with God's mission. And so don't forget about the unexpected power of God that still exists as we work through our own issues sometimes with the church.
Totally. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. So thanks for joining me, Justin, and thanks to all of you watching and listening online. Join us next time on Size Theology. Bye.